Chapter 1526. Grandfather Jun has returned 3. This slap is on behalf of Jun Linger. Jun Zan was dumbfounded. They did not expect young Luo Feng to discipline Xiao Yikan in front of their faces. But it had it be said that it was truly satisfying. Miss Yun, the eldest elder lightly frowned. No matter how wrong Miss Xiao is, she is a member of the Jun family. To say the least, it's not appropriate for you to treat her like this. Hearing the eldest elder speaking up for her, Xiao Yikan instantly reacted and furiously glared at young Luo Feng. Eldest elder, I want you to immediately kick this woman out of the Jun family. I won't allow my Jun family to be sullied by her. Let me see who dares. Jun Linger snorted and bravely stood in front of young Luo Feng, rage dominating her cute and delicate face. Dad, Miss Yun only hit Xiao Yikan because she was seeking retribution for me. And I was listening to you and accommodated her for everything, but what did she say earlier? She insulted Mom as a whore and said I was raised by a whore. Jun Zan's face chilled, and his severe eyes swept toward Xiao Yikan. You insulted my wife. Xiao Yikan's heart shuddered, but she stubbornly retorted, so what if I insulted her? I am my grandfather's biological granddaughter, what can you do about me? Jun Zan tightly clenched his fists and threw a punch, full of abhorrence. Sailing through the air, his fist swiftly arrived in front of Xiao Yikan. Family head, the eldest elder hastily shouted, his expression dramatically shifting. Xiao Yikan was also stupefied. In her eyes, since Jun Zan was willing to sacrifice his life to save her, there was no way he would hit her. However, she had underestimated Madame Jun's importance in Jun Zan's heart. At the last moment, Jun Zan's fist stopped a hairbreadth away from Xiao Yikan's ashen face before he spitefully retracted it. His voice was icy as he stated, today's matters will end now. Everything will be handled when Master returns. If Master has her stay, then I will resign as the family head and leave with my wife and daughter. Even if I don't return for the rest of my life, it's better than making my wife and daughter suffer mistreatment here. He harshly flicked his sleeves and turned around to leave, but his trembling fists revealed the fury in his heart. Eldest elder, Xiao Yikan called out upon seeing eldest elder about to leave too, halting his steps. You are going to leave like this? I was bullied, aren't you going to avenge me? Eldest elder lightly sighed. I already warned you earlier, don't try to take a mile when given an inch. If you didn't provoke trouble, why would this happen? Hence, you brought it on yourself. Forget it, everything will await old family head's return. If Jun Zan left, then the Jun family would not have a foothold on the continent after old family head passes away. Hence, the eldest elder could not help but wonder whether finding old family head's granddaughter was a good or bad thing. Xiao Yikan angrily stomped her feet and was about to continue cursing when she saw young Luo Feng's glance. She trembled from fright and hastily closed her mouth and left. This woman dared to hit her even when eldest elder was here, so now that eldest elder had departed, wouldn't she be more merciless? Hence, it was better for her to leave this place of trouble. After grandfather returned, she would make these people suffer. Let's go. Young Luo Feng's lips turned up with a languid smile and slowly turned around, lazily walking toward her bedroom. Sister Yun, aren't you going to keep walking? Jun Linger asked, her eyes blinking. Chapter 1527. Grandfather Jun has returned 4. No, I'm tired and want to rest. Young Luo Feng's wicked voice made Jun Linger more certain that she did not come here to take a walk, she came here to stand up for her. Hua Yifei watched young Luo Feng's departing figure and commented, if Miss Yun was grandfather's granddaughter, I reckon many things would not have happened. Jun Linger's face was full of disappointment. What a pity, only someone like Sister Yun deserves to be the granddaughter of a character like grandfather. Why does someone like Xiao Yikan exist? Hua Yifei shook his head with a bitter smile. The Jun family was destined for chaos due to the arrival of Xiao Yikan. Hua Yifei's words were correct indeed. Due to the arrival of Xiao Yikan, on top of the Jun family, Jun City also lost its peace. The aristocratic youths of the Jun family heard of the conflict between Xiao Yikan and Jun Linger from somewhere alone, so the youths who originally hounded Jun Linger all rushed to Xiao Yikan's side all at once and ingratiated themselves with her, wishing nothing more than to lick her shoes. Regarding the aristocratic youths, Jun Linger had long since known that they were bootlickers, so she had never given them any attention. Even so, seeing those people revolving around Xiao Yikan, her heart was embroiled in fury. Especially since when Zhang Linger brought young Luo Feng to a restaurant, they ran into a young and handsome youth trailing after Xiao Yikan like a Pekingese. He could not stop himself from making derisive remarks about Zhang Linger. Some people used to look down on others simply because she was a miss of the Zhang family. It's good now that the genuine offspring of the Zhang family has returned. Let's see if grandfather Zhang will dote solely on her still. Due to her family background, Xiao Yikan had previously often been on the end of mockery and ridicule. When had she ever been as well regarded as today? She held her chin up high and pridefully watched the approaching young Luo Feng and Zhang Linger with a sneer on her lips. That was because grandfather had lost my mother since she was young and was too grieved, so he considered her father as my mother's substitute and her as mine. Now that I have returned, the Zhang family naturally doesn't have a spot for her anymore. I sent a letter to my grandfather yesterday, and he has already promised me to kick Zhang Linger out. There was no such thing as sending a letter. To begin with, she merely wanted to entice these people to help her ridicule Zhang Linger, so she purposefully lied. Otherwise, as a miss of the Zhang family, even if she was only the daughter of grandfather's disciple, her status was still noble. Having her expelled from the Zhang family was the only way that these people would not have scruples against Zhang Linger. Nonsense. Zhang Linger's face was red from anger. Grandfather wouldn't do something like that. HMPH, if you don't believe it, there's nothing I can do. Xiao Yikan shrugged. Wait until your grandfather returns, and everything will be clear. Let's go. Zhang Linger furiously clenched her fists, fire spitting out of her eyes. She was stupefied when she saw the cyan-robed girl stepping out of the restaurant and hurriedly following Xiao Yikan. Yi Rong, why are you? Yi Rong's head remained lowered. When she reached Zhang Linger's side, her steps paused, and she said, "Sorry, Linger, my clan needs to rely on the Zhang family. I became friends with you because you used to be a daughter of the Zhang family. Now, I have no other way." After saying this, she trailed behind Xiao Yikan, her head downcast. Chapter 1528. Grandfather Zhang has returned 5. The corner of Zhang Linger's eyes reddened. You previously swore that you didn't befriend me because of my identity as a daughter of the Zhang family. You behaved uncaring of my status too and even ridiculed those people who approached me because of my status, but now, you. Yi Rong was startled, and her tone was apologetic. Linger, people who don't look out for themselves will be destroyed by heaven and earth combined. I need to consider my clan too, I hope you can understand me. People who don't look out for themselves will be destroyed by heaven and earth combined. Zhang Linger stumbled and nearly fell onto the ground, but young Luo Feng was thankfully next to her and grasped her shoulders. It's good that you were able to see a person for who they are through this. You should feel glad. Glad. Zhang Linger bit her lips. That's right, she should feel glad. If it were not for this matter, she would not be able to see this woman's true colors. Zhang Linger. Xiao Yikan was disdainful of young Luo Feng's words. Do you see? Your friend already became my lackey and your fiance. He will eventually be my man as well. Hua Yifei's family background was very bad, but he was quite talented. With his talent and looks, it would not be a poor match. Suddenly, a pair of chilly, dark eyes turned to her, and the white-robed girl smiled. What, you want to be beaten up again? Xiao Yikan shuddered, and her body turned icy under young Luo Feng's gaze. She harshly clenched her teeth. HMPH, wait until my grandfather returns. I will take care of you soon. Let's go. Without turning back, she walked to the street. Miss Cao. At this time, a servant of the Zhang family walked over. His manner was polite, but his tone was very normal and without any reverence. Family head wants to see you. Xiao Yikan snorted and haughtily said, I got it. Tell him I will return immediately. As for Zhang Linger, she entered the restaurant and did not pay attention to why her father wanted Xiao Yikan. She was full of anger without anywhere to vent it, so she naturally did not want to see Xiao Yikan again. Zhang Estate. Inside the estate, Zhang Zan could see the white-robed elderly man approaching from the air in the distance. His face was full of excitement. I respectfully welcome master's return to the clan. We welcome old family heads return to the clan. After Zhang Zan knelt down, everyone else also knelt, and their loud voices rang above the estate. In the air, a white-robed elderly man stood with his hands behind his back, bearing an immortal demeanor. He stepped down, as though a path was opening up beneath his feet. I merely passed by here and came back for a look. I still have something urgent that needs my attention. Also, I heard that the Qingale clan came to besiege the Jun family. The old man's brows were slightly knitted. He probably did not expect these people to be so gutsy as to besiege the Jun family. That's right. Jun Zan slowly stood up. Master, this disciple has something to report. Speak. It's like this, the Qingale clan dared to besiege the Jun family because they kidnapped your granddaughter, Master. What? Jun Zan's words immediately sent the old man flying into a rage. These people have a lot of nerves. They dare to touch my granddaughter. My granddaughter uneasily escaped danger but then was kidnapped by someone. Where are those bastards? Has their clan been annihilated yet? Just escaped danger but then was kidnapped. Jun Zan was stupefied, uncomprehending of grandfather Jun's words. He wiped the sweat from his forehead. The attackers have lost their lives inside Jun City. As for clan annihilation, not yet. Chapter 1529. Grandfather Jun has returned. 6. What are you people good for? Don't you know to annihilate a clan? People who dare to touch this old man's granddaughter, it's not excessive even if you make them die 1,000 times. Everyone began to sweat. Old family head, where did your immortal demeanor go? Where's your indifference and unworldliness? Could it be all a pretense? That's right, Grandfather Jun suddenly recalled something. Where's my lovable granddaughter? Quickly tell her to come out and meet her grandfather. The corner of Jun Zan's lips twitched. He really wanted to say, not only is your granddaughter not lovable but she has almost turned Jun family upside down. At this time, Jun Zan saw an approaching figure and his mouth pursed. She is here. At that instant, Grandfather Jun felt like his heart was dangling off a cliff. He repeatedly mulled over how he should greet his granddaughter. Grandfather Jun turned his head with a big smile and spoke the explanation in his mind. My dear granddaughter, it was grandfather's fault last time for not recognizing you. How about it? I didn't scare you, right? It looks like fate is on our side. Unfortunately, his words came to a halt. That strange face, whether it was the appearance or the temperament, was all incredibly different from his lovable granddaughter. Especially the greed and treachery in her eyes, disgusting no matter how he looked at it. Who is she? Grandfather Jun looked back at Jun Zan and asked in a foolishly cute manner. Jun Zan's mouth twitched. Master, she is your lovable granddaughter. Grandfather Jun was stunned. This girl was his granddaughter. Bullshit. A girl that can make him disgusted with a glance, how could she be his lovable granddaughter? On the way here, Xiao Yikan had already been informed that the old family head had returned. Otherwise, she would probably dilly-dally before returning to the Jun estate. Seeing the old man in front of Jun Zan, it was obvious that he was Grandfather Jun. She suppressed the excitement in her heart and quickly stepped up, trying her best to display her obedient side. Grandfather, you've finally returned. I have waited for you with great difficulties. Mother has already died, and it wasn't until my foster mother told me my identity that I learned I was your granddaughter. However, these jerks from the Jun family won't recognize me at all, and even the slaves dare to bully me. The more Xiao Yikan spoke, the angrier she became. She did not notice Grandfather Jun's gradually darkening face. Especially that Jun Linger. She throws around her power to bully people and even claimed that she made the decisions in the Jun family and told me to get lost from the Jun family. Grandfather, she completely disregards your blood relations, so shouldn't you mercilessly punish her? Jun Zan's expression darkened. He did not expect Xiao Yikan to distort the truth this drastically and hastily turned to Grandfather Jun but saw that the old man's face could not be any darker and a storm was raging in his eyes. It was over. Master was angry. Ice wrapped around Jun Zan's heart. He understood that he could not stay inside the Jun family any longer. In contrast, Xiao Yikan's expression turned more bloating. Who told Jun Linger to bully her? And that young Luo Feng, they both deserve 1,000 deaths. Master, Jun Zan wanted to explain, but the old man raised his hand to prevent him. Grandfather Jun's hand was pointing at Xiao Yikan, and rage was evident in his voice. Jun Zan, who told you this girl was my granddaughter? Who? Make him get his ass out here for death. Jun Zan was dumbfounded for a moment before he honestly replied, it was an elder from the Qingale clan, but he is already dead, so he doesn't need to come out for death. Chapter 1530. Grandfather Jun has returned. 7. Bang. Grandfather angrily punched Jun Zan's head, wishing nothing more than to beat this idiot to death. Jun Zan looked at the old man with a face of grievance. Master, what did this disciple do wrong? Bastard, idiot, how could this girl be my granddaughter? How could I have a granddaughter like this? Grandfather Jun furiously grasped onto Jun Zan's lapels and shouted, "Return my granddaughter to me, return my granddaughter." Jun Zan's head was dizzy. He did not know what had happened, but he understood one thing: Xiao Yikan was not Master's granddaughter. Happiness came too suddenly, and he was unable to recover. Grandfather. Xiao Yikan panicked and stepped forward, wanting to pull the old man's sleeve. I'm truly your granddaughter. The second her hand touched Grandfather Jun, it was ruthlessly flung off. Scram, could it be that I don't recognize my own granddaughter? Jun Zan just regained his wits with great difficulty when he heard the old man's words. He could not help but inwardly mutter, "You haven't even seen your granddaughter, how could you know her?" Xiao Yikan's mind turned blank and she bewilderedly looked at the raging old man. She was not related to the Jun family. Impossible, mother would not lie to her. Moreover, that jade pendant had received the verification of the Qingale clan. Grandfather. Xiao Yikan slowly recovered and aggrievedly stated, "I'm the genuine one. Also, my jade pendant was verified by the Qingale clan, they merely destroyed it." Qingale clan means bullshit. Grandfather Jun had always been a refined old man, but now he was swearing time and time again. The boiling fury in his heart was apparent. Even my disciple hasn't seen my jade pendant, but the Qingale clan could determine yours to be the real one with an illustration alone. The fury in the old man's chest billowed. In truth, even if the jade pendant was placed in front of Jun Zan, he might not be able to determine to the veracity of it, only Grandfather Jun had the knowledge. Grandfather Jun inhaled a deep breath and caustically said, "Forget it, this matter can't depend on the Jun family. I should go find my granddaughter myself. Right, call Linger back for me to see. After I see her, I will leave again." Jun Zan hurriedly agreed and ordered a guard to find Jun Linger. Previously, he understood thoroughly that Jun Linger did not want to see Xiao Yikan, so he did not call his daughter here as well. But now, this good news must be shared with Linger. Jun Zan grew more excited the more he thought about it, and a smile involuntarily turned up on his lips. No one paid attention to the ashen Xiao Yikan. Not long after, the guard returned with two girls closely following behind. Grandfather Jun's face was still infuriated, but for the sake of his beloved granddaughter, he forcefully suppressed the rage. "Linger, you are back." Grandfather Jun recovered his previous smiling demeanor and turned to look outside the courtyard. This glance brought his voice to a halt, and his eyes shot open with shock. "Am I seeing things?" Grandfather Jun harshly rubbed his eyes and widened them, intently staring at the white-robed girl standing beside Jun Linger. His breathing became rushed and his expression was full of excitement. That was right, it was excitement. Jun Zan glanced at the old man and pondered over it in his mind. It looked like this girl was very important in Grandfather Jun's heart. Otherwise, the old man would not seek retribution from the Poison Valley for her and reveal so many emotions upon seeing her still alive. Chapter 1531. Grandfather Jun has returned. 8. Dad. Not understanding what had happened, Jun Linger quickly walked to Jun Zan. She glanced at the pale Xiao Yikan with a frown, confusion flashing through the depths of her eyes. Then, Grandfather's return quickly cleared the confusion in her. She slowly walked to the front of Grandfather and hesitated for a moment before asking, "Grandfather, you've returned." The girl's melodic voice pulled the old man out of his excitement. He turned his sight to Jun Linger and chuckled. "Linger, aren't you happy seeing Grandfather? What happened? You used to throw yourself at me immediately." Jun Linger blinked. "Grandfather, Xiao Yikan said just now that she sent you a letter and she claimed that you wanted to kick me out of the Jun family." "Xiao Yikan." Grandfather Jun frowned. "Who is that? Do I know them?" Jun Linger blinked in confusion, her gaze turning to Jun Zan, asking him what was happening. On the way here, it was not that Jun Linger did not ask the guard, but because Jun Linger was very approachable, the guard did not answer her question. Instead, he mysteriously said that she would know in time. So Jun Linger was still kept in the dark and did not understand the situation. Master, Jun Linger glanced at the fallen Xiao Yikan. Linger is referring to her. Nonsense. Grandfather Jun flew into a rage and his fist swung to hit the tree beside him. What are you? First you impersonate my granddaughter and then put words in my mouth and falsely claim I want to expel my granddaughter. Who gave you the guts? Xiao Yikan shuddered from terror, not daring to utter a single word. Jun Linger finally reacted and threw herself into Grandfather Jun's arm with a cry with an extremely aggrieved expression. Grandfather, why did you only return now? Xiao Yikan has been turning the Jun family into complete chaos during this period of time. She even insulted mother as a whore and said she would expel Sister Yun and me out of the Jun family. She claimed that she was the true miss of the Jun family and that Sister Yun and I were nothing but freeloaders. Jun Linger has suffered through a large grievance these past few days, but she was finally able to voice all of her grievances at that moment and was crying very pitifully. Oh, right, she also wants to kill all of the servants of our Jun family, saying that since she was a miss of the Jun family, it was reasonable for her to kill some family servants. Grandfather Jun was already trembling from his anger and was pointing at Xiao Yikan but unable to say anything. He did not expect that a few days of delay would cause such a crisis and even caused his granddaughters to suffer through such tribulations. Jun Zan, Grandfather Jun angrily shouted, causing Jun Zan to nearly kneel on the ground from fright. He wanted to cry, Master, I also didn't know she was fake. Idiot, you mistook the fake for the real one but actually did not discover that the real one was standing in front of you. How can an idiot like you exist in this world? Master, I initially thought that since the Qingale clan used her to threaten the Jun family, she must be the real one. Who would have thought that she would be a counterfeit? Jun Zan also felt very aggrieved but he abruptly realized something in the next moment and in confusion asked, the real one is in front of me. Master, what do you mean? Forgive your disciple for being uneducated and not understanding your words. Grandfather Jun snorted and turned to glare at Yun Luo Feng. Little Yun, how long will you pretend to be innocent and ignorant over there? The entire Jun family turned silent at that instant, and everyone looked at Yun Luo Feng. Even Jun Linger stopped sobbing. Chapter 1532. Grandfather Jun has returned 9. What did Grandfather Jun mean? Pretend to be innocent and ignorant. Yun Luo Feng did not expect the old man to change the topic to her and unconsciously smiled. Where's the jade pendant? Grandfather Jun asked, extending his hand to Yun Luo Feng. Yun Luo Feng glanced at grandfather's calloused hand and obediently fished it from her waist, placing it on his palm. This, Jun Zan was stunned. How could there be 2 jade pendants? In contrast to the astonishment of the Jun family, Xiao Yikan felt her mind explode and hastily screamed, hers is fake. It's fake. She must have seen my jade pendant and purposefully found someone to recreate it. Mine is the genuine one. Shut up. Grandfather Jun did not treat Xiao Yikan with the same benign temperament as he did with Yun Luo Feng. He glared at her, his murderous intent fully unleashed. I will settle accounts with you later. Shut your mouth now. Otherwise, I will make you lose your life here this instant. Xiao Yikan closed her mouth immediately, not daring to utter anything else, and was shuddering on the floor on her hands and knees. Grandfather Jun turned to look at Yun Luo Feng. Shouldn't you give me an explanation? Yun Luo Feng touched the tip of her nose. When I arrived at the Jun family, I encountered a crowd of people coming to the Jun family for retribution. They claimed that the Qingale clan kidnapped the owner of this jade pendant, so I was uncertain whether my jade pendant was real or fake and did not dare to rashly identify myself. Solemn silence descended on the Jun family once more. Everyone was dumbfounded. Could it be that the counterfeit thought she was the real one while the authentic one thought she was the fake one? My goodness, just how big of a mistake was this? Jun Linger's initial stupefaction had already turned into excitement. Her whole face was red, and she nearly fainted from happiness. Sister Yun was a member of the Jun family, and Xiao Yikan was a fake. This piece of news was too joyous. Oh, the excitement was too much. Grandfather Jun was speechless. Logically, he should rebuke both Yun Luo Feng and Jun Zan, but how could he bear to admonish Yun Luo Feng? Hence, he vented all of his fury on Jun Zan. You idiot, my granddaughter was inside the Jun estate this whole time, but you didn't realize it. Jun Zan's expression turned more aggrieved. Master, my niece did not reveal her jade pendant, so I didn't know her identity. As he said this, he noticed the old man's infuriated expression and hastily corrected himself. It was all my fault. I am an idiot and didn't recognize my niece. I am truly too stupid. Master, you don't need to punish me this time, I will punish myself. I will resign as the family head and pass it on to little Feng. Speaking to this point, Junzan inwardly rejoiced. Young Luo Feng's return was undoubtedly the best news. He could finally be rid of this heavy responsibility. Dream on. Grandfather Jun glared at Junzan. My granddaughter is very delicate, yet you want to let this heavy responsibility crush her to death. The Jun family will be managed by you, don't trouble my granddaughter. Junzan wanted to cry. Master, you are too biased. Moreover, when this girl was beating someone up, she was clearly so fierce, yet you call her delicate. This, young Luo Feng glanced at the pair of master and disciple and interjected, embarrassed, I think you have misunderstood something. The original owner of this jade pendant wasn't my mother. What? Her words caused the old man's complexion to shift. His granddaughter obtained with such difficulty was flying away. The heavens would not be so cruel, right? Junzan was startled and asked, then do you know where is the original owner of this jade pendant? What is your relationship with her? Young Luo Feng paused. The owner of this jade pendant is my mother-in-law. Her son is my husband. Chapter 1533. Yun Xiao's Fate 1. With a buzz, Grandfather Jun's mind turned blank, his stupefied gaze dazedly staring at young Luo Feng. His granddaughter turned into a granddaughter-in-law. What could be a bigger blow than this in the world? Master. Junzan subconsciously turned his head and saw Grandfather Jun's ashen face. He jolted and swiftly walked to the old man and pacified him. Whether she's your granddaughter or granddaughter-in-law, little Feng is still a member of our Jun family. Upon hearing this, the originally unhappy old man instantly brightened and donned a smile. His disciple was correct. Whether she was his granddaughter or granddaughter-in-law, this girl was still a member of their Jun family. Wasn't that enough? Grandfather Jun exhaled a deep breath and walked to Yun Luo Feng with a faint smile. Little Yun, it looks like our fate is truly intertwined. Where are my grandson and daughter currently? Your daughter is still currently in the land of no return. As for your grandson, Yun Luo Feng paused briefly before continuing, he is the Ghost Emperor. What? Grandfather Jun's complexion instantly shifted. My grandson is the Ghost Emperor. Yet, back then, so many factions from Central Province wanted to eradicate his grandson. Grandfather Jun grew infuriated. If he had known the identity of Yun Luo Feng and Yun Xiao earlier, he absolutely would not spare the people who went to eradicate the Ghost Emperor back then. Also, you don't only have one grandson. Mother adopted a son and daughter in the land of no return, and on the day that I departed she also gave birth to twins, a girl and a boy. The originally raging old man instantly turned stupefied. This fortune arrived too suddenly. Ever since his wife died and he entrusted his daughter to someone else, never seeing her again, the children of the Jun family had withered to nothing, and the third generation had Junlinger alone. But now, young Luo Feng informed him that his daughter not only adopted a son and daughter but had also given birth to twins, a girl and a boy. Junzan, quickly support me. Grandfather Jun dizzily backed up a few steps, but fortunately, Junzan quickly grasped him and prevented him from fainting and falling to the ground. Grandfather Jun tightly clutched Junzan's hand and dazedly requested, hit me. I want to see if I'm dreaming. Don't look at how mighty Junzan was in the Jun family. In front of Grandfather Jun, he evidently became an obedient disciple. There was no way that he would not do what his master ordered. Hence, he slapped the old man's head, and Grandfather Jun grew furious in a split second, mercilessly kicking his leg out and sending Junzan flying back. Junzan landed on the floor in a heap and aggrievedly looked up at the old man with an incredibly pitiful expression. Master, you told me to hit you. You hit me just because I told you to. Grandfather Jun glared at Junzan before turning to Yun Luo Feng with a smile. Girl, let's discuss something. Yun Luo Feng raised her eyebrows. What? How about you be my granddaughter and have the Ghost Emperor become my grandson-in-law? The jaws of everyone in the Jun family dropped. This was their first time seeing someone unwilling to recognize their grandson and insisting on forcing his granddaughter-in-law to become his granddaughter. Yun Luo Feng did not respond and asked instead, I have one thing to ask you. Do you know where the Ghost Emperor is? Chapter 1534. Yun Xiao's Fate 2. 3 years. She and Yun Xiao had been separated for 3 whole years. She did not want to continue waiting. Grandfather Jun frowned and sighed. He headed to God Burial Mountain. God Burial Mountain. These 3 words caused Yun Luo Feng's heart to skip a beat. God Burial Mountain was this continent's most dangerous location. Its danger level was similar to the forest of no return from Long Xia continent. Heading to a place like that was essentially the same as heading to death. I understand. Yun Luo Feng inwardly came to a decision and said, I will depart tomorrow and go to God Burial Mountain to find him. Little Yun. The old man's eyebrows knitted tighter. If I have read it correctly, you should be at Sage God Advanced Rank level. Sage God Advanced Rank level. The old man's words were akin to lightning striking across a clear sky, stupefying everyone present. Although they knew Yun Luo Feng was extremely strong, they did not expect her to have reached Sage God Advanced Rank level. Grandfather Jun was shaking his head with a wry smile. Although your talent is formidable, your strength is not enough for you to head to God Burial Mountain. Yun Luo Feng's expression remained determined. Regardless of whether my strength is enough or not, I must head to God Burial Mountain. Because there was a person waiting for her there. Logically, I should depart today for God Burial Mountain, but, she paused briefly. Madame Jun's health appears to have some problems, and I'm afraid she won't last until I return. Madame Jun's constitution was fairly weak and she was seriously ill. Grandfather Jun had already hired countless physicians for her and even personally treated her but was still unable to cure her. Little Yun, you can cure Fuer. Grandfather Jun's eyes brightened. Other people might not understand Yun Luo Feng's medical talent, but as someone who witnessed Yun Luo Feng's solution back then, he understood. She has been poisoned, but this poison wasn't acquired and was instead carried over from her mother's womb. I'm afraid it will be very difficult for her to recover. Yun Luo Feng glanced at the old man's excited face and smiled. However, I can suppress her condition and treat her when I return. In truth, the condition of Madame Jun was not as simple as being poisoned, there was a problem with every aspect. With Yun Luo Feng's current strength, she would have to exhaust a large amount of energy to cure her. And it would take at least months to treat her unless she broke through to Sage Lord level. Yun Luo Feng currently longed for Yun Xiao, so how could she stay here to treat Madame Jun without worry? The most important thing right now was to control her condition and continue treating her after she returned. Alright. Grandfather Jun's emotions surged and he dryly coughed. Jun Zan, immediately bring little Yun to see your wife. Jun Zan had learned of Yun Luo Feng's abilities from Jun Linger, so he naturally did not have any doubts about Grandfather Jun's words. He eagerly led Yun Luo Feng toward his wife's residence. Jun Linger did not follow them. Her clear eyes slowly turned to Xiao Yikan on the floor, disdain rising on her face. Xiao Yikan, do you remember what you previously said? You previously repeated that Sister Yun and I were merely grandfather's god-granddaughter and only you could make decisions. You even wanted to kick us out and replace my dad. Unfortunately, you are nothing more than a counterfeit. I truly don't understand where you got the courage to pretend to be a member of my Jun family. Chapter 1535. Yun Xiao's Fate 3. Xiao Yikan shook her head, her face deathly pale and her eyes full of despair. Impossible. This is impossible. The jade pendant was clearly given to me by my foster mother. How could she lie to me? Jun Linger waved her hand and ordered, come and take Xiao Yikan and parade her through the streets. Also, announce all of her evil. Make everyone understand that this Xiao Yikan is merely a counterfeit. Didn't you ingratiate yourself with Xiao Yikan and sided with the powerful? Then I want to make you understand that Xiao Yikan is nothing but a counterfeit. Also, Yi Rong, did you predict this day when you betrayed me for Xiao Yikan? Yes, miss. 2 guards came up and grabbed Xiao Yikan, dragging her outside. No, I don't want to go. I beg you to forgive me, I beg you. Xiao Yikan's voice was wrought with grief and heartbreak as she was forcefully dragged out. Her voice became more and more distant, gradually fading from Jun Linger's ears. Ellipsis. The next day, daybreak. All of the Jun family stood on the side and was respectfully sending Yun Luo Feng off. Jun Linger tightly held Yun Luo Feng's hands as she miserably asked, Sister Yun, when will you return? I will return after I find Yun Xiao, Yun Luofeng aloofly answered as she looked up at the distant sky. Grandfather Jun sighed. Girl, you really don't need me to go with you. God Burial Mountain is too dangerous, how can I not worry about you? With difficulty he obtained an obedient granddaughter-in-law, so how could he be willing to part with her like this? Yet, this granddaughter-in-law was very stubborn and he attempted to persuade her the whole night without success. No need, Yun Luofeng answered while shaking her head. I will come back alive. There were too many people that she could not leave behind on this world, so how could she be willing to lose her life in God Burial Mountain? Seeing her insistence, Grandfather Jun did not say anything else and was silent for a moment before digging out 2 jade pendants from his lapels and placing them in Jun Luofeng's hand. One of the jade pendants was clearly the one that he snatched from Yun Luofeng yesterday, the one he placed inside his daughter's swaddling clothes back then. However, he did not take the jade pendant because he wanted to steal Yun Luofeng's things, it was to satiate his longing for its owner. Since my daughter gave you this pendant, then it belongs to you now. It can help withstand one attack when your life is in danger. Of course, it only works if you wear it on your neck, it won't work if it's taken off. This jade pendant could only ward off a fatal attack. If it was not fatal, this pendant would not work. As for the other jade pendant, I placed a strand of my soul's power inside of it. Soul's power. Hearing this, every member of the Jun family uniformly turned to look at the old man with shock in their eyes. Everyone understood what the soul's power meant. The soul's power was obtained by Grandfather Jun separating a strand of his soul and forcefully sealed it inside this jade pendant. It would take a couple of months for him to recover that strand of soul's power. If you are in danger, then send your spiritual energy into the jade pendant and I will sense it. I can instantly appear beside you regardless of how far away I am. Looking at the jade pendant that Grandfather Jun was giving to her, it would be a lie if Yun Luofeng claimed she was not moved. She had only met Grandfather Jun twice, so they were not close to this extent even after considering their mutual connection to Jun Fengling. Chapter 1536. Yun Xiao's Fate 4. Yet, Grandfather Jun was willing to sacrifice this much for her. Her heart was not made of stone, so how could she not be affected? Thank you. Yun Luofeng accepted the jade pendant and pressed it closely against her chest, a dazzling light shining from her pitch-black eyes. Little Yun, you haven't called me grandfather yet. The old man shot her an aggrieved glance. You are leaving now, aren't you planning to call me grandfather at least once? A faint smile rose on her lips. Grandfather. Her voice was very faint and aloof, but it slammed heavily into Grandfather Jun's heart, filling it with satisfaction. Her call of grandfather filled him with satisfaction. If this girl was not going away to find her husband, he would certainly keep her here so that she could say it every day. I am leaving now. Stay safe. Yun Luofeng cupped her fists and turned to leave the courtyard. Release me. Let me enter. I want to see Linger. Suddenly, a boisterous voice was heard from outside, causing Jun Linger to frown. Linger, for you? Jun Zan asked, glancing at Jun Linger with astonishment. Jun Linger nodded and looked at the people guarding the door. Her melodic and indifferent voice rung, let her enter. With Jun Linger's agreement, the guards stopped blocking the person, allowing her to successfully enter the courtyard. Linger. Yi Rong's eyes landed on Jun Linger, full of guilt and remorse. Before she could say anything, she was interrupted by the other girl. Yi Rong, I am not that familiar with you. Don't call me Linger. You can call me Miss Linger like everyone else. Jun Linger's lips curled. Although Xiao Yikan causes her a lot of trouble, she must thank her for one thing. Because of her, she managed to clearly see Yi Rong's true colors. Linger, I only said those things because I was deceived by her. Yi Rong panicked and wanted to run towards Jun Linger but was blocked by the 2 guards, keeping her a meter away from Jun Linger. Yi Rong's heart felt a chill. You truly don't plan to forgive me? Tears rose from her eyes as she looked at the indifferent Jun Linger while tightly biting her lips. Yi Rong, did you forget what you previously said? You said that you had to befriend Xiao Yikan for the sake of the Yi family and you merely used me. Jun Linger snorted. Why do you think I have to forgive you? Yi Rong's heart skipped a beat, and she admonished herself. It was not enough that she followed Xiao Yikan, but why did she tell that to Jun Linger while trying to prove her loyalty to Xiao Yikan, who would have expected Xiao Yikan to be a counterfeit and cause her to offend Jun Linger? Linger, you aren't someone so cruel. A teardrop hung on the corner of Yi Rong's pain-filled eyes. Dad, I don't want to see her. Jun Linger pouted. This woman is too detestable, more detestable than those brown-nosing social climbers. All right. Jun Zan indulgently patted her head. Then Dad will have people kick her out and evict the Yi family from Jun City forever, is that all right? Yi Rong's face turned ashen, and she started lightly trembling. If the Yi family was truly forced to leave Jun City, then she would be a felon for the rest of her life, and the elder generation of the clan absolutely would not spare her. However, Jun Zan would not give her a chance to hassle Jun Linger and waved his hand, directly ordering the guards to toss her out of the estate. Jun Linger did not plead on behalf of the Yi family at all. She might be kind, but she did not tolerate any deceit. Yi Rong deceived her, so she must pay the price. Chapter 1537. God Burial Mountain 1. God Burial Mountain was the most dangerous part of the seven-province continent, not only due to the abundance of spirit beasts in there but also because of the countless danger zones and traps in the mountain. Anyone who triggered these traps would dissipate into the air even if their strength rivaled the gods. This was how God Burial Mountain obtained its name. A place that could become the burial place of even a god, the danger within could be imagined. Of course, not the entire mountain range was incomparably dangerous, but the deeper you went, the more dangerous it became. As for the outer parts of the God Burial Mountain, they possessed a countless number of ferocious spirit beasts, but it still allowed people to leave alive. Currently, a white-robed girl slowly entered the God Burial Mountain. Her hair fluttered in the wind and a faint light enveloped her beautiful and wicked face. Master, Xiao Mo left the god's code space and appeared in front of Luo Feng. He looked at the girl with a slight purse of his lips. Are you sure you want to enter God Burial Mountain? Truthfully, I don't know anything about God Burial Mountain and also don't know the situation inside. I'm sure. She could not allow Yun Xiao to face danger alone. No matter what happened, she would stay by his side. Alright, then I will accompany you without reserve. Xiao Mo smiled. He had been all alone for so many years. Meeting Luo Feng was the fortune of a lifetime, so how could he cower as soon as he faced danger? Luo Feng did not respond and called instead. Instantly, the muscled Yun Yi stood behind Luo Feng, guarding her safety like Mount Tai. Inside God Burial Mountain, there was an endless danger, so she must summon the puppet out just in case. Let's go. She turned her gaze to the continuous stretch of mountains before her, determination dominating her face. Yun Xiao, wait for me. I will find you in no time. Inside God Burial Mountain, dangers overlapped each other. The instant Luo Feng stepped inside, she could sense a pressure. If Little Tree was still here, she would at least have an extra safeguard, but Little Tree had fallen into a deep sleep, and she could not rely on him. Hence, Luo Feng was extra cautious. Rustle, rustle, rustle. Suddenly, a murderous intent came from the underbrush to the side. Luo Feng's brows knitted as she called, careful. At the same time, a group of skeletons walked out of the underbrush, each holding a bone club in their hand. Moss-green hellfire floated in the sockets of where their eyes once used to be, giving them an eerie and odd appearance. Like a well-trained group of soldiers, their steps were uniform and ordered. Master, it's the Skeleton King and his troops. The Skeleton King's strength is at Sage Lord intermediate rank level and the others are at least Sage God advanced rank, but a majority of them are Sage Lord low rank level. Xiao Mo sharply inhaled. If I have guessed correctly, an army once came and lost their lives here. I don't understand how these soldiers were able to use a skeleton form to remain alive in this world and have raised their strength to this extent. Luo Feng's heart also sunk. If it was a group of spirit beasts, perhaps she could still fight them. However, it was a group of skeletons standing before her. Skeletons that did not feel pain and were already dead. How should she fight a group of skeletons? Chapter 1538. God Burial Mountain 2. Master, let's flee. Xiao Mo's voice rung by her ears. We still have a sliver of a chance if we escape. Otherwise, we will die here. He did not expect that they would encounter the skeleton army the instant they entered God Burial Mountain. Didn't they say that the outer limits of the God Burial Mountain weren't very dangerous? However, what Xiao Mo did not know was that they had bad luck. The skeleton army only patrolled once a month, yet they just happened to encounter them during this month's patrol. Yun Yi, Yun Luo Feng frowned and coldly called. Yun Yi immediately understood his master's meaning. He scooped one hand around Yun Luo Feng's waist and picked up Xiao Mo with the other before charging toward the crowd of skeletons in front of them. If they want to enter God Burial Mountain, they had to go through this crowd of skeletons. If they drew back, it would mean they would not be able to step inside. The hellfire in the skeleton's eyes intensified, and the bones in their hands swung fiercely at Yun Yi. Although Yun Yi was a puppet cast from steel, he still could not bear the beatings of the skeletons. His body swiftly became ridden with holes, as though he was pierced by a sword over and over again. The skeletons might only be holding a bone club in their hand, but this bone club was sharper than any weapon, and each strike equated one hole. If these bone clubs landed on Yun Luo Feng, it would be as simple as holes upon holes. Yun Yi was merely a puppet without a soul and did not understand pain. He only knew how to obey Yun Luo Feng's orders and swiftly dash forward. Seeing Yun Yi escape, the skeletons all chased after them while brandishing their bone club. It appears that these skeletons might be dead already, but they still know to chase after enemies and are not the same as puppets like Yun Yi. Yun Luo Feng contemplated. However, after this, I must reforge Yun Yi. Suddenly, Yun Yi halted. Yun Luo Feng looked up and discovered a bottomless cliff in front of them. Master, there's something odd about this cliff. Xiao Mo frowned. There appears to be a restriction in this location. If you jump inside, you can't fly in the air. Yun Luo Feng turned her head and glanced at their pursuers before turning back to the bottomless cliff. Her eyes turned cold as she sternly ordered, Yun Yi, go down. Yun Yi did not hesitate. Because he was a puppet, he did not display any fear and expressionlessly jumped off the cliff. The wind whipped past their ears, the force causing her to be unable to open her eyes. The sharp winds caused her to ache all over, as though knives were cutting open her skin. She hurriedly shut her eyes and waited for the landing. However, before she could land, she lost consciousness and darkness overcame her. She remained clueless about the following events. In her groggy state of mind, Yun Luo Feng could faintly hear a call from her side. Miss, wake up, wake up. Her brows knitted and opened her eyes, annoyed. A young and handsome face entered her sight. The man wore a flax-colored long robe, and his good-looking appearance was matched with healthy tan skin. His gray-colored eyes contained a faint trace of concern. When he saw Yun Luo Feng open her eyes, joy entered his heart. Miss, you are awake. Yun Luo Feng was taken back. She rubbed her temples and climbed up from the bed. I remember that I encountered a group of skeletons in God Burial Mountain. Where am I? Chapter 1539. God Burial Mountain 3. The man smiled. We are at God Burial Mountain, and you will be safe in this country. The man swiftly explained everything to her. It turned out the people in this place were visitors who had encountered danger inside God Burial Mountain over the past hundreds and thousands of years. Whether they were chased by skeletons or spirit beasts, they ended up escaping to here. Because spirit beasts could not enter this place, they started living in seclusion here. Of course, there were people who wanted to leave, but they were unable to leave once they entered the base of the cliff. Hence, this place had eventually become a country of its own. Although the population was sparse, there was a royal city and a market, no different than the outside world. However, spirit beasts and skeletons could not enter this country, but who knew whether the people could find an opportunity to leave one day. As a result, the country had a rule that the strongest man of the younger generation could become the king of this country. The strong people from the newer generation were recruited by the elder organization. The marriage of the king was decided by the elder organization. As the king, he did not have the right to marry the one he loved most. Only the strongest woman could become the queen. Hence, the position of the king and queen were both unstable. If someone who surpassed them appeared, they could replace them. In summary, this was a country where your strength decided everything. The inheritance of the crown from father to son in the outside world was invalid here. Evidently, the man who stood before Yun Luo Feng was the king of this country. However, from the way he dressed, she could tell how poor the royal family was. They didn't even have proper clothing. No wonder these people wanted to leave this place. The handsome man scratched his head and genially asked, I already told you everything. Can you tell me your name? Yun Luofeng pondered over it before answering, Yun Luofeng. These people had been living in seclusion here for so many years, so even if she spoke her name, they would not know who she was. Hence, she did not need to worry at all. Miss Yun, since you arrived here, you are now a citizen of our country. You will need to spend the rest of your life here. The man lightly sighed, his features brimming with worry. He was born and raised inside God Burial Mountain and had never seen the outside world, so he had no knowledge of the outside world. We truly can't leave here. Yun Luofeng frowned. She must leave. Yun Xiao was still waiting for her. That's right, the people who have come here are unable to leave, the handsome man responded with a faint smile. Hence, you can rest here without worry. Right, I haven't told you my name yet. My name is Xuanhuan. After saying this, he gave a few orders to the palace maids tending to her before leaving. Right, Yun Luofeng suddenly remembered Yun Yi and Xiao Mo and hurriedly checked on the situation inside God's code space. She discovered the battered Yun Yi laying on the grass and Xiao Mo silently sitting beside him. Seeing them, Yun Luofeng subconsciously relaxed. Forget it, since we can't do anything, we will wait and see. I believe we can find a way to leave. Inside a bedchamber, a gently beautiful woman was sitting on a chair and listening to the report of a palace maid, a cold glint flashing through her eyes. Chapter 1540, God Burial Mountain 4. What is the strength of this new arrival? Reporting to the queen, this servant doesn't know, the palace maid answered while respectfully kneeling on the ground. Humph, the gently beautiful woman snorted. Observe that woman for me. If she is weak, forget it. But if she is strong, then immediately send someone to secretly eliminate her. Yes, my queen, the maidservant retreated. The woman tightly clutched the teacup in her hand, a cold glint flashing through her eyes. She did not become the queen because she was greedy for power. It was because she truly fell in love with Xuanhuan. Because of this, she had no scruples about killing her older sister. That's right, the elders did not choose her as a candidate to become the queen. It was her stronger sister instead. In order to obtain Xuanhuan, she poisoned her sister and then immediately stepped over her sister's corpse and ascended the throne to become the queen. How could she permit anyone to threaten her position now? Unfortunately, her sister was not only the queen chosen by the elders, but Xuanhuan and her sister also had affection for each other. As a result, this man did not touch her at all during the 2 years that they had been married. Recalling the past, the killing intent in the queen's eyes deepened and with a crack, the teacup in her grasp also shattered. Queen, why are you so angry? Suddenly, a light laugh was heard, quickly followed by the entrance of a woman in a cyan-colored ruchun. She had a clean and refreshing type of beauty, comparable to a newly blooming lotus. State preceptor, why did you come? Seeing this woman, the queen's voice was very respectful. Like Yun Luofeng, this woman also came from the outside world, but her methods were too formidable. She was talented in both the art of poison and medicine, so she was greatly revered in a country without physicians like this one. In addition, this woman could observe the stars and calculate a person's fate, so the elders unanimously bestowed her with the title State Preceptor. I know the girl that king brought back, the woman in cyan loathingly uttered, hatred rising in her eyes. The queen was surprised. She did not expect the state preceptor to know Yun Luofeng. Is there some enmity between you two? The woman in cyan sneered. We naturally have a great enmity between us. Queen, when I arrived, I told you that my dad and I and others were misunderstood by the world and were hunted. After being forced to escape from Poison Valley, we were massacred by the Ghost Emperor. Besides me who luckily escaped with my life, everyone else died. The one who caused all of this was Yun Luofeng. Lin Yuyu had not seen Yun Luofeng before, but she had carved this name into her mind during these years. If it were not for Yun Luofeng, Poison Valley would not be destroyed and she would not have had to watch her father be killed, unable to do anything. The queen exclaimed with shock, Yun Luofeng is really this vicious. She isn't only vicious. Lin Yuyu's eyes turned colder as she said, full of murderous intent, do you know the world's assessment of Yun Luofeng? She specializes in stealing men, whether it is a 100-year-old elderly or a 10-year-old child, she won't let them slip away. 3 years ago, this woman delusionally wanted to seduce my dad and become the mistress of Poison Valley. But my dad severely rejected her, so she harbored resentment and found the people she once successfully seduced to eliminate everyone in Poison Valley. In reality, Lin Yuyu clearly understood why Poison Valley suffered a massacre. Chapter 1541, God Burial Mountain 5. It was because an elder of the Poison Valley entered the illusory realm of the witchcraft tribe and schemed against Yun Luofeng and caused her death. As a result, the faction on friendly terms with Yun Luofeng sought retribution from Poison Valley. She naturally could not say these reasons. As for whether Yun Luofeng truly died or not and the Yun Luofeng picked up by the king was the one she wanted, this was unimportant. After all, she had never seen Yun Luofeng herself and was unfamiliar with her appearance. However, just the mere fact that her name was Yun Luofeng meant she deserved death. The queen recovered from her shock and furiously said, "How could such a cruel woman exist in this world?" Right, she was taken in by King, will she seduce him? And King is in his prime, what if he can't resist the temptation? Lin Yuyu's eyes sparkled, and her lips curled up with a cold smile. She doesn't let even old men slip by. King is so handsome, so how could she give him up? Moreover, this woman seeks wealth and honor, so she definitely covets your position as the queen. Hearing this, the queen instantly gnashed her teeth. I originally thought that I would spare her if she was weak, but I must eliminate her now. Queen, don't worry, she is our common enemy, I will help you deal with her. However, since she has landed in my hands, so I don't want to let her die too quickly. This country was her territory. Regardless of how strong Yun Luofeng was, how could she win against those elders? Hence, she must use this opportunity to mercilessly humiliate her. This is reasonable. The queen nodded. State preceptor, you have suffered so many grievances, you deserve revenge. This woman won't have a good fate in your hands. Lin Yuyu laughed. Her cold eyes swept over the queen and left without saying anything else. After Yun Luofeng's health recovered, she left the room. This palace was unlike the outside worlds and did not have any guards posted at the door. She directly left the palace and arrived in the boisterous market. She could see a crowd in the distance. Their eyes contained worship and reverence as they all looked in one direction. It's State Preceptor. I heard the State Preceptor will make a prophecy today. I wonder who is unfortunate enough to be the target. Hey, this State Preceptor is truly miraculous. If she says someone won't live past midnight, then that person certainly won't. Otherwise, the elders would not hold her in such high esteem and give her a status that surpasses the king's. However, the State Preceptor typically won't make prophecies for anyone. Anyone who visits her, wanting her to prophesy their life expectancy, will be rejected. People won't know their end is near unless she personally comes out to specify that person. Inside a multi-story building, a woman in cyan walked up the tall balcony under the escort of many palace maids. Like a ruler who looks down on the populace, she haughtily peered at the humans below her. Her expression made her akin to a deity who can determine a person's life and death, everyone's fate unable to escape her sight. Prophesying someone's lifespan, Yun Luofeng paused with interest. Xiaomo, there's someone who possesses this ability in this world. Xiaomo's voice was heard from her soul after a moment. I have never heard of that. Even the strongest prophet from 1,000 years ago didn't have this power. I didn't expect a small country would have someone who possessed such a mysterious power. Perhaps because she wanted to know how this woman made her prophecies, Yun Luofeng did not hurry to find the exit and stopped instead, surveying the woman on the balcony. Chapter 1542, God Burial Mountain 6. A palace maid walked up. Everyone, just like the past, whoever receives the pill in our State Preceptor's hand is the one who will lose their life in a few days' time. Pill. Yun Luofeng frowned and turned to look at the audience beside her, asking, why does the State Preceptor use a pill instead of directly saying someone's lifespan? That person glanced at Yun Luofeng with disdain in their eyes. You don't even know the State Preceptor's personality. The State Preceptor is kind and can't bear to say someone's end is near, so she uses this method to avoid it. After saying this, they did not pay attention to Yun Luofeng anymore and intensely watched the woman in cyan on the balcony. Yun Luofeng was speechless. If she truly could not bear it, then she would not prophesy someone's death. Her action was undesirable to begin with. Everyone, our state preceptor has come to a conclusion. She hopes the one predicted by her will make arrangements for their funeral. The palace maid spoke again, causing everyone to become more anxious. The state preceptor acted. She flicked a pill into the air, and it instantly hit a person's throat. The pill might have come from a distance, but it did not have a lot of power behind it, and the spot it hit did not even redden. Even so, the target knelt on the ground with a plop, their deathly pale face full of despair. Everyone else all shook their head, their face containing sympathy and pity, but no one went over to help the person up. Young Luo Feng was different from other people. After seeing the pill hitting that person's throat, her face darkened and a harsh glint flickered past her eyes. Xiao Mo, did you see it? A moment later Xiao Mo answered, I saw it. This pill is smeared with poison. It only needs to touch the skin and the person will certainly die within 5 days. I was puzzling over the fact that there was actually someone who could predict a person's death in this world, but I didn't expect them to use this cruel method. Those people said that the state preceptor did not accept anyone who visited her and only used this method to predict someone's death. This method was evidently accurate. It was not that the youth who was hit by the pill was destined to die. But, the pill was smeared with poison, so how could he not die? Master, are the people of this country stupid? Xiao Mo was speechless. The woman claimed to be the state preceptor obviously did not have any true skill but was able to dupe these ignorant people through and through. They are not stupid, it's just that this country doesn't have the existence of physicians and poison masters, so they don't know the pill has poison on it. Moreover, the inhabitants of this country had been cut off from the rest of the world for so many years, so how could they know the underhanded schemes of the outside world? It was natural for them to be deceived. Master, won't you go save that youth? We are strangers, so why should I save him? Young Luo Feng shook her head. I won't interfere with matters unrelated to me. More importantly, this place respected strength. If she saved someone prophesied to die, then it would attract the notice of the elders in the country. Perhaps they would even force her to be the queen. Why would she do something so strenuous and unrewarding like that? Young Luo Feng turned around and did not glance at the situation any further, walking to the other end of the street. On the balcony, Lin Yuyu appeared to have detected something and she looked at young Luo Feng in the crowd, killing intent flashing through her eyes. Chapter 1543, God Burial Mountain 7. Young Luo Feng, I'll never let you off. She withdrew her gaze and told an imperial maid, tell him he'll die in 5 days. After saying that, she walked off the platform and left smartly. Young Luo Feng spent a whole day looking for a way out, but it seemed that the bottom of the cliff had been hexed and no one could fly out of here. Young Luo Feng walked slowly into the room, pondered and said slowly, Xiao Mo, it's not going to work if we keep searching like this. I have to find where the hex is. Only when the hex is removed can we leave here. Before Xiao Mo in the God Code world could answer her, the door opened and a handsome man in a flaxen robe walked in, surrounded by a crowd of guards. Miss Yun, you seem to be recovering well. The man was surprised. If an ordinary person jumped off the cliff, he would definitely be badly injured even if he didn't die. But she recovered within a day. Young Luo Feng took a sip of tea and asked, may I ask you a question? Please, Miss Yun. Xuanhuan grinned, I'll tell you anything I know without reserve. I just want to know if there is any special place in your country. Special. Xuanhuan pondered for a while before he replied, in the back mountain, there is a forbidden area. People who go to the forbidden area will lose their lives. So, over time, no one will enter there. If you mean special, only this place is special. Forbidden area? Young Luo Feng paused, can you take me there? Xuanhuan shook his head with a wry smile, the elders don't allow anyone to enter the forbidden area for safety reasons. Unless you get the token of the elders, you can't enter it. I can't help it. For some reason, young Luo Feng had a hunch that she would find a way out in the forbidden area. Please take me to see the elders of your country. Xuanhuan silently thought for a moment and nodded, okay, follow me. In this country, neither the king or the elders were superior. On the contrary, if anyone wanted to see them, he just needed to report in advance, and then he could see them after getting their permission. Therefore, Xuanhuan could take young Luo Feng to the Council of Elders. At this moment, in the Council of Elders, the elders, who looked worried, were discussing something. Just then, someone reported that Zan Yuan came to see them with a strange woman. Yuan Zan came to see us with a woman. The oldest man paused for a moment and frowned. Does he want to take an imperial concubine? No way, we will not allow him to do this. In this country, the number of women was significantly lower than that of men, so polygamy was not allowed, in case some men couldn't find wives. Though Zan Yuan was the king, he could only have one woman. Only when the queen died in an accident would he be able to take a second wife. Let them in, let's see what he wants, suggested another elder. The eldest elder nodded, let them in. Soon the door was opened, a light shone from outside and a brilliant beam of light fell upon a man and a woman standing at the door. The woman was peerlessly beautiful. With a wicked gleam in her dark eyes, she looked lazy and leisurely. Chapter 1544. God Burial Mountain 8. All the elders were stunned at her beauty. Both the queen and the state preceptor were gorgeous. However, compared with this woman in white, they were like mud to clouds. No wonder the king brought this woman to them. Your Majesty, the old man frowned, why did you bring this woman here? Although this woman was beautiful, their country valued strength more. She was just a beautiful vase. First elder, Zan Yuan said respectfully, Miss Yun wants to go to the forbidden area in the back mountain, so she came here to ask for your permission. No way. First elder's face darkened and he snapped, don't you know what a place the forbidden area is? No one who goes there can come back alive. We will never allow anyone to enter that place again. You'd better go back. Miss Yun, Zan Yuan said, turning to Yun Luo Feng with a wry smile, you heard it. The elders won't allow you to go there. To be honest, Yuan Zan was not going to let Yun Luo Feng go to the forbidden area. After all, that place was too dangerous. She, a weak woman, was courting death by going there. Yun Luo Feng looked up at the elders, what if I say I can find a way in the forbidden area to get you out of here? What? Yun Luo Feng's words stirred up a storm in the minds of the elders. She could find a way in the forbidden area to get them out of this place. Beyond all doubt, for the elders, leaving the bottom of the cliff was the most important thing. If what Yun Luo Feng said was real, they really should take a chance. The elders all hesitated and looked at each other in consternation. Finally, they turned their eyes to First Elder and waited for his decision. Just when First Elder was going to speak, a chuckle came from the outside. A woman in a blue long dress and the queen stepped from outside. Her face lit up with a faint smile, and she looked at Yun Luo Feng. The queen saw Yun Luo Feng's face at this moment. Her heart was filled with jealousy and anger. She, who didn't take the woman seriously, didn't expect that the woman picked up by the king was so beautiful. How could she feel at ease if she was still alive? Fortunately, this idiot offended the great state preceptor. She would not be able to survive. Elders, Lin Yuyu took back her gaze and said with a sneer, don't be fooled by this woman. I've predicted it. There's no way for you to leave here. If there really was such a way in the forbidden area, how could I not know it? The elders hesitated again. Indeed, they had all seen the power of the state preceptor. If there was really a way out in the forbidden area, how could the state preceptor not know it? Besides, Lin Yuyu paused and turned her sharp stare to Yun Luo Feng. I observed the stars last night and found that today there would be a woman coming who would bring a devastating blow to our country. Though the elders didn't like Zan Yuan taking a woman to see them, they did not show any unfriendliness to her. Now, hearing Lin Yuyu's words, all of them turned their eyes to Yun Luo Feng. Their eyes were filled with vigilance and suspicion. Your Majesty, this woman, who is of unknown origin, will bring disaster to our country. First Elder pondered for a while and said, so please drive her out right away, and forbid her from entering our country again. Chapter 1545. God Burial Mountain 9. Lin Yuyu lowered her eyes. What she wanted was not just to drive Yun Luo Feng out. First Elder, as I've said, this woman will bring disaster to our country. Unless she dies, we will all die. Die. The elders were stunned. Since they began to live here, their lives had been peaceful and they never had any struggle or fight. So, they couldn't persuade themselves to kill this woman. An unfathomable light flickered across Lin Yuyu's eyes and she continued to bewitch the elders. Elders, do you want to sacrifice her or let the whole country perish? Indeed, it would be better for them to kill this woman of unknown origin than sit by and watch the whole country perishing. First elder gently sighed, guards, catch this woman and burn her to death. Elders. Xuanhuan's face changed. Just because of an assertion made by state preceptor, you believe Miss Yun will destroy this country? Isn't it ridiculous? In fact, Xuanhuan never liked Lin Yuyu. This woman predicted people's lifespan at will and made countless people panic. She, however, accepted people's worship comfortably. Didn't she think that her behavior was cruel? Now she decided to kill young Luo Feng without batting an eye. How could she kill a living life so easily? Your Majesty, as the king of the country, you should consider our country. First elder frowned, don't be willful anymore. Do you remember you used to willfully refuse to marry the queen, just because you couldn't forget a dead woman? When can you keep the overall interests of the country in your mind? Xuanhuan shuddered. What happened before was a pain that could never be erased from his heart. Even now, the wound in his heart hadn't been healed. Seeing these people decide her fate at will, young Luo Feng laughed. What are you laughing at? Lin Yuyu scowled and asked in a cold voice. Do you know me? Young Luo Feng glanced at Lin Yuyu and gave a faint smile. If she didn't know her, why did she want to kill her? I just told the result of my prediction. Don't make it personal. Really? Young Luo Feng stroked her chin and spoke with a smile. Today, at the market, I saw you predict a person's lifespan. I wonder what disease he had and when he will die. Lin Yuyu looked at young Luo Feng impatiently. He doesn't have any disease. God wants him to die. No one can stop it. He will die within 5 days. Are you sure? No one can stop it. Young Luo Feng squinted, with a dangerous gleam in her eyes. Lin Yuyu's heart sank. For some reason, she had a bad feeling in her heart, but she had no choice but bite the bullet, so she said, yes, no one can stop it. Young Luo Feng said no more and turned to Xuanhuan, find that man. I can save his life. Are you sure, Miss Yun? Xuanhuan was surprised. Stop people from dying, was this possible? Young Luo Feng smiled, God wants him to die. I'm sorry, I like saving people's lives despite God's will. Of course, she said the last sentence to Lin Yuyu. Lin Yuyu looked embarrassed. She felt more and more uneasy in her heart, but she did not know why. Okay. To be honest, Yuan Zhan didn't believe Yun Luo Feng could save people's lives despite God's will, but this was the only way to save her. Therefore, without any hesitation, he ordered people to bring that man here. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. Turn on the notification for any new updates. For every 100 new subscribers, we will have a mass release of the ongoing novel updates. Thank you for listening to our content. Chapter 1546, God Burial Mountain 10. A lot of people had seen what happened in the market, so it was easy to find that man. In a short time, a young man who looked desperate was brought here. Let's get started. Young Luo Feng walked slowly to the young man who sat desperately on the ground and took out a cloth bag that contained a lot of silver needles. The whole council of elders fell silent and everyone was quietly looking at young Luo Feng. Young Luo Feng disinfected one of the silver needles and slowly pierced it into the young man's body. As he let out a muffled groan, the whole silver needle disappeared into his body. As the silver needle entered into his body, young Luo Feng slowly injected some spirit energies into his body. Soon, the young man's body was covered with silver needles, and his face was not as pale as before. But no one thought she could save him. After all, given the power of state preceptor, no one could escape her predictions. Neither could this poor young man. Okay. After some time passed, young Luo Feng pressed her hand against the young man's chest. With a thud, the silver needles covering his body were immediately shaken out. Meanwhile, the young man opened his mouth and spat a mouthful of black blood. Lin Yuyu's face turned pale, and a cold gleam flickered across her eyes. Even though this woman could detoxify this man, so what? 5 days would be enough for her to kill him. Young Luo Feng's next remark, however, dashed her plan. Young Luo Feng turned to the elders and said flatly, for caution's sake, please let him stay in the council of elders for 5 days, in case some people try to murder him. And I hope you can keep an eye on him. Though the elders didn't believe Yun Luofeng's power, they still agreed, because they wanted Yun Luofeng to admit she lost with her own mouth. This country was isolated. The residents here were simple and would keep their promise, so Yun Luofeng left with an easy mind. Elders, Lin Yuyu frowned, with a cold gleam in her eyes. Before she said anything, she was interrupted by Xuanhuan's cold voice. State Preceptor, why don't you just give her 5 days? If this young man dies, it proves that your prediction is correct. But if he is still alive, it shows that your ability is questionable. I wonder whether you have the courage to wait for 5 days. 5 days would be enough for him to find a chance to save Yun Luofeng. Lin Yuyu's face was ghastly pale. She clenched her fists and her eyes sparkled with a grim gleam. State Preceptor, everything will be clear in 5 days. Please don't worry, First Elder said. Humph. Lin Yuyu flicked her sleeves hard and walked out. She kept telling herself that Yun Luofeng might not have been able to detoxify her poison. The young man still looked desperate. He trusted wholeheartedly in Lin Yuyu's power, so he didn't believe he could survive for 5 days. In his heart, he had already sentenced himself to death. 5 days passed quickly. Within the 5 days, the country's residents all heard of Yun Luofeng's bet with Lin Yuyu. Of course, everyone sniffed at Yun Luofeng's stupidity. State Preceptor was like a god. How could her prediction be wrong? The woman was clearly stalling for time, just to live 5 more days. Unfortunately, 5 days later, she would still have to die. However, in order to witness her miserable end, the residents didn't fall asleep on the night of the 4th day. Instead, they went to the imperial palace, stood outside the Council of Elders and waited overnight just to witness the death of the poor young man. Chapter 1547. Expose Her True Colors 1. Squeak. Under the public stare, the door of the Council of Elders was slowly pushed open, and an old man walked out. The old man was expressionless with a shrewd gleam in his eyes. Looking at the public's curious faces, he didn't say anything. Finally, a young man couldn't help but ask doubtfully, "Elders, what happened? Is that young man dead? Should we prepare for his funeral?" However, no one believed that the young man was still alive, because in their heart if State Preceptor said someone would die, he would surely die. First Elder didn't say anything. He pressed back against the left side of the doorway, exposing the entire room to the public. In the room, the young man was sitting in a daze, and his eyes were filled with confusion, astonishment, and excitement from the bottom of his heart. He was not dead. State Preceptor predicted that he would die within 5 days. However, he was alive after the 5 days. What could be more exciting than this? The crowd was all stunned. They couldn't believe their eyes. This young man was not dead. Was the State Preceptor's prediction wrong? Behind the crowd, Lin Yuyu, in a long blue dress, looked pale at the young man walking out of the room, and her tightly bitten lips trembled slightly. This was impossible. Her poisoning technique was the best in the whole Poison Valley. How could Yun Luofeng detoxify her poison? At this moment, a chill swept over her body, making her feel like she was falling into an ice cellar. Then she felt a creeping unease settle over her shoulders, and she turned to leave the place. Suddenly, a tall figure stood in front of her, and then came the magnetic husky voice of a man. "Lord State Preceptor, where are you going?" Lin Yuyu suddenly froze. She mechanically lifted her head only to see a handsome face. But the smile on this face made her shudder. "Your Majesty, you... Didn't you say that no one could stop this young man from dying?" Xuanhuan gave a sneer, "But now, how can you explain this?" Lin Yuyu forced a smile. "That's just a coincidence. Besides, my predictions had never been wrong." "Really?" As soon as Lin Yuyu said this, a wicked voice came from the side. Hearing it, Lin Yuyu's eyes were filled with anger, and she turned her head and glared at the white-clad woman walking towards her. Under the morning light, the woman, in a snow-white robe, was stunningly beautiful. Even the slightest facial expression of hers was mesmerizing. But Lin Yuyu gnashed her teeth at her. "You have the power of prediction." Young Luofeng raised her eyebrows, and gave a wicked smile. "I wonder if you can point out the dying ones among these people now." Since Xuanhuan stopped Lin Yuyu from leaving, everyone's eyes were turned to her. Now hearing Yun Luofeng's words, all of them shuddered and stared at Lin Yuyu nervously. Although the poor young man survived, they still had a great fear of state preceptor's ability, so they were so scared. Lin Yuyu's face changed. I will not randomly predict anyone's lifespan. Otherwise, my prediction may be wrong. Only at special times can I. Young Luo Feng didn't want to listen to Lin Yuyu's words. She raised her eyebrows. Xuanhuan, take her space ring and give it to me. Chapter 1548. Expose her true colors too. Your Majesty. First Elder frowned. Seeing that Xuanhuan was going to follow her order, he hurriedly stopped him. Though the prediction of State Preceptor is wrong this time, we know her ability well. I can let your friend go, but you can't be disrespectful to the State Preceptor. Xuanhuan slowly walked up to Lin Yuyu, raised his hand and grabbed her collar. Your Majesty, stop it. First Elder scowled and quickly came forward to stop him. However, it was too late. Xuanhuan had taken the space ring from Lin Yuyu and handed it to young Luo Feng. Even he didn't know why he believed this woman so much, and he even defied the Elder's orders for her. Your Majesty. The Elders all flew into a rage. None of them expected that Xuanhuan would defy their orders for a woman. However, before they could vent their anger, young Luo Feng took a pill out of the space ring. Lin Yuyu used this pill to predict people's lifespan. They could recognize it by its smell alone. When young Luo Feng took out the pill, the crowd was stunned, wondering what she was trying to do. It is said that you don't have the heart to predict people's lifespan with your own mouth, so you use this to speak for you. Young Luo Feng played with the pill in her hands, smiled and glanced at Lin Yuyu. Lin Yuyu's face was ghastly pale. She clenched her fists tightly. Since the woman knew that the pill was poisonous, why did she hold it in her hand? Didn't she fear the poison? Yes, that's the pill. Before Lin Yuyu said anything, Xuanhuan on the side answered the question for her. In this case, I wonder if State Preceptor would like to take the pill. Young Luo Feng looked at Lin Yuyu with a faint smile and asked wickedly. Lin Yuyu stepped back 2 steps. This pill can't be eaten. It can't be eaten, but I guess it can be touched. The smile on young Luo Feng's face spread. So, would you like to touch it? In fact, though Lin Yuyu was born in the Poison Valley, she was not immune to all poisons. Every time she used the pill, she would wrap it in spirit energy. She never let it touch her skin, so she wouldn't be poisoned. But now, hearing young Luo Feng's words, Lin Yuyu took another 2 steps back, with a flustered gleam in her eyes. Xuanhuan seemed to notice something. He reached out his hand to take the pill from young Luo Feng's hand and forced Lin Yuyu to take it, but young Luo Feng withdrew her hand before he touched it. If you want to die, you can try it. Young Luo Feng squinted, and a dangerous light flashed through her eyes. Xuanhuan scratched his head and laughed. I saw you had no problem holding it. Besides, even if I have anything wrong, you must be able to save me. Young Luo Feng glanced at Xuanhuan and turned her eyes to Lin Yuyu. Since the pill is yours, why don't you dare to take it? Lin Yuyu's eyes twinkled, and a grim light flickered across her eyes. Maybe you've applied poison on the pill and are trying to kill me. Young Luo Feng smiled. How can I do it under so many eyes? Lin Yuyu. No, I should call you the heiress to the Poison Valley. On God Burial Mountain, only the people of the Poison Valley hated her. Yun Shao annihilated the Poison Valley because he thought they murdered her. She must be from the Poison Valley since she hated her so much. Chapter 1549. Expose her true colors 3. When Lin Yuyu heard young Luo Feng expose her identity, a flustered gleam flashed through her eyes, but she said nonchalantly, I don't understand what you mean. She would never admit that she had a grudge against young Luo Feng anyways. State Preceptor, she is not lying. You are the heiress to the Poison Valley. Suddenly, a soft voice came from behind the crowd. The crowd parted and a gentle-looking woman slowly came forward. Seeing the beautiful woman walking to her, Lin Yuyu scowled. What do you mean, Queen? The Queen turned her beautiful eyes to Lin Yuyu and tightly bit her lips. State Preceptor, don't deny it. 5 days ago, you came to me and told me what happened between you and young Luo Feng. And you slandered her, claiming that she seduced your father. You hate her so much that you tried to frame her. Boom. Anger welled up within Lin Yuyu, and she glared at the Queen's tender face. Queen. You, quote. State Preceptor, I pretended to trust you these days just to avenge my sister. Lin Yuyu covered her mouth with her hand, tears running down from her eyes. However, Zhan Yuan's body shook when he heard this. He tightly clenched his fists. What did you say, Queen? The Queen lowered her eyes and a sinister light flickered across them. After quite a while, she raised her head and looked at the king sadly. Your Majesty, I think I have to tell you that the murderer of my sister is state preceptor. She pointed at Lin Yuyu, her voice filled with hatred. However, our people believed in state preceptor too much, and no one would believe me even if I told the truth. But I don't want to see her hurting innocent people anymore, so I had to bring the truth to light. With that, the Queen slowly took out a cloth bag from her pocket and opened it carefully. Suddenly, a brown pill came into people's sight. I secretly picked up this pill when state preceptor threw it away. I assure you Miss Yun hasn't touched it. Now can you touch it, state preceptor? In an instant, all eyes, filled with doubts, turned to Lin Yuyu. Lin Yuyu was trembling with anger. Queen, have you forgotten it was you who asked me to deal with your sister 2 years ago? Now you want to pin it on me? The Queen covered her mouth in astonishment, and tears fell from her eyes. She was my sister. How could I kill her? State preceptor, you pour dirty water on my head to exonerate yourself. Do you think it's going to work? Lin Yuyu didn't expect that the Queen would stand up and plant the crime she committed on her. When did she kill her sister? 2 years ago, the Queen bought a poison from her, and then her sister died. Through examination, she found that what killed her sister was exactly the poison the Queen had bought from her. She thought that since she knew the Queen's secret she would be able to do whatever she wanted in this country, but she never expected that this woman was so insidious as to pin her crime on her. State preceptor, Zhan Yuan growled. His eyes turned bloodshot. Did you kill Qinger? His childhood lover, his beloved wife, was murdered by state preceptor. Chapter 1550. Expose her true colors. 4. He must cut this woman into pieces to avenge her. Lin Yuyu sneered. Queen, do you think you can safeguard your position by doing this? You've seen what happened to me. Once you become jealous, you will be eternally doomed. She underestimated young Luo Feng, so she lost. As a jealous woman, the Queen would never tolerate any woman around the king. If she tried to deal with young Luo Feng, she would suffer a crushing defeat. The Queen's eyes were grim. However, as she lifted her eyes, she looked sad and fragile again. State preceptor, I don't understand what you're talking about. Humph. Lin Yuyu snorted, you know it. After saying this, she didn't say anything more, her face cold. State preceptor, can you explain this to me? First Elder was confused and after quite a while, he asked angrily. In an instant, everyone's eyes turned to state preceptor. Under their glare, Lin Yuyu's face turned increasingly paler. Young Luo Feng glanced at the Queen. If she was right, when the Queen met her in the Council of Elders for the first time, she looked rather hostile to her and her eyes were even filled with rage. Why did she stand up and speak for her? Young Luo Feng squinted, turned to Lin Yuyu and said with a faint smile, in fact, it was easy to figure it out. The pill was covered with a fatal poison, and anyone who touched it would die within a few days. So, it's not that state preceptor can predict people's lifespan, but that she poisoned the people, so they would definitely die. Boom. The crowd was in an uproar. Everyone became angry. However, they restrained their inner impulse and quietly waited for Lin Yuyu's explanation. Lin Yuyu gave a sneer and kept silent, not denying young Luo Feng's charge against her. State preceptor, First Elder finally lost control of himself and he growled, is that true? You don't have the power to prophesy. You just kill people to make your prophecy come true. Lin Yuyu gave a mocking smile, and her face was filled with sarcasm. She slowly turned her eyes to First Elder, and said coldly, I could do this because you are too stupid. You should blame yourselves. She meant that they were deceived by her because they were too stupid. They should blame no one but themselves. At this moment, all the people present couldn't control themselves and swarmed towards Lin Yuyu, wishing they could break the woman into pieces. Even First Elder didn't stop the furious crowd but instead clenched his fists. This woman was able to prophesy people's lifespan because she secretly killed all those people by the date she prophesied. It was ridiculous that he devoutly believed in her and treated her like a god. Bitch, you deceived us. You should die a miserable death. I'm going to avenge my countrymen by breaking you to pieces. Damn you. Go to hell, you evil woman, you nearly killed me, I have to torture you to death. Among the crowd, the angriest one was the young man who was just saved by young Luo Feng. If it hadn't been young Luo Feng, he would have died in the last 5 days.